1. I live in a town that's connected to a busier city by two large bridges that lay over Lake Superior. The bridge is essentially the border between the two states. It takes about 1 minute to get across the bridge because we rarely have any traffic, because it's a reasonably small populated area. And it's so large and different from being on the road that you can't really miss driving over it. So about a year ago, my family and I were driving around beneath one of the bridges on the side with the larger city, just talking and having a good time. And next thing I know, I look out the window and we're in my hometown, driving around maybe a mile away from the other side of the bridge. This was on a street that is usually on our route home, but I didn't remember being anywhere close to this area last time I looked out the window, which wasn't even a minute before. So obviously I bring up the fact that I don't remember going over the bridge, and my father, who seems a bit agitated for some reason, even though we were happily chatting earlier, shoots me down with we were probably too caught up in our conversation to notice. And I see my mom give him a weird look and whisper, "I don't remember going over it either." And after that we just drove the rest of the way home in silence. I remember this looming feeling over me, like a fear or anxiety. Maybe it was confusion mixed with the terror about the fact that I was in one place and then another in a second. I really don't have any idea what happened. And I don't know why my father seemed so angry about me bringing it up. I never asked my siblings about if they remembered, and I've also never asked my parents about it since. It could be possible that my mother and I just forgot about driving over. But why would my father say we instead of you? How could all three of us not realize we drove over the bridge? I think it's possible we saw something that wasn't supposed to be seen. I don't want to seem like a crazy conspiracist, so I just try not to think about it. Update. I just brought it up to my parents. I hadn't even finished my question. Remember when we were in the city and then we headed up to our hometown and we didn't remember? And that was when my mother cut me off with a chuckle and said, "Yeah, that was crazy." And my father just laughed. And that's that, I guess. 2. I've told people this story over the years, and of course no one ever has any sort of explanation for what happened. I've just come to the conclusion that it had to have been a slight glitch, so I felt like I'd share it here for the first time. This happened about 11 years ago when I was 16. At this time I was living in an apartment with my mom. This was about a year and a half after she'd gotten divorced from her ex. She had a new boyfriend that lived about an hour away from where we did. One weekend she left to go stay with her boyfriend, and I was alone with my best friend in our apartment for that time. Now, before she had left, she gave me money for groceries along with a list of stuff to get for her as well. So anyway, one day while she was gone, my friend and I went to get groceries. I remember we got a bunch of good snacks for ourselves. Our thing at the time was ripple chips and French onion dip. We ate it all the time, so of course we picked that up along with all the stuff for my mom, like cereal, yogurt, and some other stuff. Once we returned to my apartment, we set all the groceries on the counter, and I went over to the fridge as my friend threw me all the food that had to be refrigerated. I remember this so vividly. Every time my friend would throw me something, he'd call out what it was, and I'd repeat it as I caught it and put it away. I remember it ended with yogurt, 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 yogurt. French onion dip, French onion. As I put all this stuff away, including our French onion dip for later when we got snacky. Fast forward a few hours, we had a friend of ours come over for maybe 20 minutes just to hang for a bit, before she had to go to some event. I only remember because she was dressed up for something and wanted to show us, pre-Instagram days. Anyway, it wasn't long after she left that we were ready to put on a movie and eat some chips and French onion dip. We went to the kitchen to get our drinks and snacks, opened the fridge. The French onion dip is gone. It's just fucking gone. Not where I put it, not anywhere. We were so confused as we were both positive that it made it home and was put away because he tossed it to me. We said it out loud when he did. So of course we're baffled. Trying to find any excuse for it being gone after taking literally every single thing out of the fridge. We even took out the drawers, we checked the trash, and the bags we brought the groceries home in. It was nowhere. We called the friend that came over, and felt crazy even asking if she took it. And her response was, "Why would I even do that?" And she reminded us she was never out of our sight. and no one else was in my apartment besides us. I know it's just dip, but it's the only glitch-type situation that's ever happened to me. And I still think about it all the time. I know it was in the fridge. We even checked the receipt. It was on there, we paid for it. Where the hell did it go? Why did it disappear? 3. I am no stranger to sleep paralysis or even lucid dreaming. I constantly have nightmares and often wake myself from moving or talking in my sleep. This happened around 2 years ago in the beginning of July. My birthday was coming up, and every year as my birthday gets closer, I begin to feel more anxious and scared for the arrival of my special day, since almost every year it ends in disaster or me crying a lot for whatever reason. Anyways, because of all that anxiety, my dreams and sleep paralysis become more frequent and disturbing. So one night I was laying in my bed trying to get some sleep. I remember closing my eyes for only a second, and I got the feeling that something was wrong. I opened my eyes, and the first thing I saw were a pair of eyes staring down at me. I could tell it was a man, and he was standing on the side of my bed, leaning his face towards mine. In all honesty, it looked like this face was about to kiss me. I felt his breath that he let out through his mouth hit my face, and I remember it smelled like strong mints. It felt cold, and my heart was racing, and I can feel my sweat dripping on the side of my face. I felt terrified at first, but then it's more like nervousness and anxiety. Like the feeling you get before going on a roller coaster, where you're scared but also very much excited. I gasped for air, since I guess I held my breath in, and just when I did, the man stands straight and walks out of my room. Then I start to hear whispers. I couldn't hear what it was saying, it sounded like complete gibberish, but hearing the whispers made me relax, and then I had realized I was in sleep paralysis. I walked outside my room, like the paranoid person I am, with a small bat I had in my room, and checked every room, and made sure all the doors were locked. No one was there, obviously, and my doors were locked, so I let myself back in my room and drifted to sleep again. This time it was a dream. In my dream it was morning, and I was getting up from bed and went to the bathroom to take a shower. It was my usual routine, and it honestly felt like I was awake. I did my hair and my makeup and made my way back to my room. When I walked in, there was a black figure standing over my bed, as if trying to figure out if someone was in the bed without moving any blankets around. I froze and I took in a deep breath and relaxed myself to prepare myself for whatever this person would do if they saw me now. But it looked like they hadn't noticed me, so I spoke. "Hey, what are you doing?" I said in a surprisingly strong and confident tone. There were whispers, but again I couldn't make out what was said. But as the whispers began, the man was slowly bringing himself up. And when he reached a straight stance, he walked towards my window. I usually have control of my dreams, but this one wasn't letting me have it. I found myself walking towards the man in a normal pace, like I wasn't scared nor threatened. I grabbed his shoulder and felt instant dread. My hand remained in his shoulder and I stared at the ground. I felt tears filling my eyes, and I slowly moved my hands around his waist, and I hugged him from behind and cried. I said, "Don't leave me." And with that I woke up. It was still dark outside and I felt so lonely. I sat up and hugged my legs and began to cry. I was sobbing in the middle of the night and I didn't know why. I was confused and felt completely empty. The next day I had the same dream without the sleep paralysis. The next night I had the dream again, but this time I had control in it. So when I grabbed his shoulder and felt the dread, I asked, "Is this my sadness I feel?" And his whisper stopped and it was quiet for a couple seconds. And then I heard a slight "sss" sound. It kind of sounded like it was distorted. Much like it would sound if you were flipping a radio station to the next to find the inaudible station. For some reason, I felt inside that he was trying to say yes, but I wasn't so sure. I closed my eyes and put my other hand on his shoulder and I asked, "Am I happy?" And the figure quickly spun around towards me and grabbed both my hands. The only thing I saw were his eyes, the lightest brown eyes. I was a bit shaken up and started to swear again, and he said perfectly, "Without me you are not." and before you never were. The moment I appear, your sadness will disappear. But the moment I leave, you'll be shot with devastation. I remember those words so perfectly. After that, I woke up immediately, wrote down what he had said. I thought it was beautiful. And I'm a poet, so I thought it'd be great to use. The next night I was excited to see this man again. All that day I kept thinking about what I was going to ask next. So when I fell asleep and the dream began, I checked to see if I was in lucid. When I found out I was, I made my way towards my room, and there he was. But something was off. He wasn't his black shadow self. He was shaped different, like now I can make out an actual figure. His build was average, and he was flicking a lighter that was on his left hand, while his other hand was inside his coat pocket. But he still stood over my bed, staring at me that wasn't there. I was a little unsettled, but remained cool and walked up to him. I put my hand out, and he put the lighter in my hand. I asked if he smoked, and he said yes. His voice was still a little distorted, but I could hear what was being said. I laughed and jokingly said, "Kind of unattractive, don't you think?" He rushed towards me and said, "But you smoked when you were 14. I was confused. Yes, it was true, I smoked cigarettes when I was 14. But I stopped my habits and was scared because if this guy knew, then that meant my dreams are using my memories as a way to get to me. There's no worse nightmare than a nightmare of you reliving a bad or traumatizing memory. I told him, "That's not me anymore." He said, "No, it isn't." He paused for a moment and then said, "You're much stronger now." Tears began to fill my eyes, without me wanting them to. I ran into the bathroom and looked in the mirror and felt angry. I screamed and punched the mirror and fell to the floor. I was losing consciousness. I saw blood everywhere, and I saw legs rushing through the door. I felt arms around me. The noise around me sounded like the ringing you get in your ears, but I can also hear someone talking. But I couldn't understand what was being said. I tried to look up at the face of the man lifting me up, but my vision was too blurry, so I used all my strength to touch his face. And when I did, I felt stubble. I smiled, and then woke up. After that, I just kept having those same dreams play over and over again. Then my birthday hit, which was the 29th of July. It has been almost a full month of those encounters, and I needed a break from them. I was 17 and decided to go out with friends in LA. We went to a restaurant and laughed and joked around a lot. And for once I wasn't thinking about the man in my dreams, or the same man who stares at me while in sleep paralysis. I felt kind of empty. My happiness I was just having started to fade, and I grew quiet and my friends joked around and told me to listen up and be happy. But when they said that, it only made me feel more lonely. I knew my happiness was all fake. I was scared of something bad happening because something bad usually does happen on this day. I felt like everything was just a big lie. So I stepped outside to get some air. It was late, and LA around this time is a bit sketchy, but I didn't mind. I got so lost in thought that I didn't realize there was someone talking to me. "Hello," a guy said. I looked at him, and I thought he was attractive. He had a well-cut beard with a beautiful face structure. He wore a burgundy beanie with a leather jacket, black jeans, and combat boots. His fingers had big rings on them, and despite his fashion sense, I thought his face was beautiful. I looked at him and politely said, "Hey, do you live around here? My friends and I are a bit lost and can't find the public parking lot we parked in." "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't live out here either," I said. He laughed a bit and said, "Well, that's okay then. I guess we'll just take a break and eat here." "I guess I'll see you in there then," I said, waving at his friends as they walked inside. The guy asked, "Would you like to join us?" "My friends are in there," and he said, "We'll join." We all sat with each other, laughed and having fun. I found out his name was Christian and he was 19. He was so sweet but weirdly smelled like mint, so every time he leaned to me to tell me something, I felt his cold, minty breath on me. It was kind of funny, to be honest. But anyways, we found out that we lived about 25 minutes away from each other, so we pretty much hit it off. Before we left, I gave him my number, and the more we talked and went out together, we eventually made it official. Fast forward to November. From time to time I still had those dreams, and I eventually told Christian about the dreams, but I never told him what the figure would say to me, or every detail of the dreams, only the sleep paralysis. The only thing I told him was the little poem the figure told me. Christian said that I should find out what that little poem or riddle the figure told me means, to crack his code. And that's all I told him. After weeks of no luck, I finally gave up. Other things in my life started happening, and I started to stress a lot and become depressed. I didn't want to stay home where either lived, and neither did Christian. I decided I needed a break from the dreams and my at-home issues, so I thought it'd be great for me and Christian to take a little vacation. We rented a motel and stayed out in LA. We were excited and ready to finally be alone together for a whole week. That night, before we went to bed, I ended up venting about my feelings and all the issues I had in my life. It became this big talk where I was crying a lot. Christian comforted me and told me as long as he was there, I was never going to get hurt. With that, I was okay again and ready to sleep. And when I did, I had the dream again. It was identical from the first dream I ever had of this encounter. I wasn't in control of this dream, which was weird now, since I'd gotten used to always being in control. But after it ended, I woke up and eyes were staring at me. I gasped and moved to the other side of the bed, and then realized Christian was laying next to me. I was just about to reach the lamp on the nightstand when I heard, "Shh, shh, shh." I rubbed my eyes and asked, "Christian, is that you? You scared me." He whispered, "I'm sorry, I just felt you moving a lot in your sleep, and I didn't want to get in your way to get up, but you stopped breathing for a moment, so I looked over to see if you were okay." I was confused, but was too tired to talk further, and just told him to get back into bed with me. He laid next to me, spooning me from behind. I reached over to touch his face. I felt the stubble, and I smiled. Then I began to have flashes of the many times I've dreamed of touching the stubble of the man in my dreams, and then smiling while covered in blood after smashing the mirror. I sat up and turned on the light. Christian asked if I was all right, and what was wrong, and I looked at his face, his eyes, those light brown eyes, perfectly matched to the ones in my dreams. I stood up and tears began to fill my eyes without me wanting them to. "Did you know I used to smoke cigarettes when I was 14? I asked him. "Yeah, because you thought of it as an escape. Why?" "Kind of unattractive, don't you think?" I jokingly said. "I smoke too, love. Are you calling me unattractive?" He joked around. "And if I am?" I smiled at him. "Hey, but didn't you smoke when you were 14? But that's not me anymore. That's you now," I laughed. "Yeah, you're right, that's not you anymore. I, however, am powerless against those nasty sticks." He came closer to me and hugged me and then said, "You're much stronger now." I held him and cried my eyes out. Months later I found out what the figure's words meant. "Without me you are not, and before me you were never." Which obviously meant that before I even met Christian, I was never happy, which was true. My life was very rough and I always struggled making friends. And when we broke up, I was of course hurt by it. The moment I appear, your sadness will disappear, but the moment I leave, you'll be shot with devastation. When Christian came into my life, I had happiness. I never knew what it was like to be treated like a princess in a relationship. He was the first guy to make me feel like I was important and special, and feel things that were entirely new for me. But the moment we parted, everything bad began to happen. I don't just mean bad luck. I mean, when he left, I was faced with the hardships of life and death. I won't go into too much detail, but let's say I've experienced a lot of traumatic events that still hurt me till this day. I was reaching further and further down the pit. As a whole year passed, then he came back into my life again, at the most needed time. Fast forward to last year around May. Christian messaged me and asked to see me. I agreed, but was very nervous. At that time I went through physical abuse and my face was still healing from it. So when I went to approach him, he was taken aback. He was upset and immediately hugged me and told me to stay at his place for the night. I agreed. That night I slept on his bed and he slept on the floor next to me. I was having a bad dream when suddenly I woke up to a pair of eyes. Again I gasped and moved back. And again he said, "Shh." I laughed and said, "You always do that to me." "You were moving a lot and stopped breathing again. Of course I have to check." He laughed. I asked for him to sleep next to me and we fell asleep. I woke up very early that morning where it was still a little dark out. I walked over to the balcony door. And there he was, flicking his lighter the same way the figure in my dreams did. It was you. 4. Back in college in the mid-90s, my sister and I were driving my dad's old Mercedes. Not a fancy car, mind you. Old enough to have fins and a manual transmission, with a long gear shifter that you kind of rode the car with. We came up on a yellow light in a big, busy intersection, and stopped as it turned red. We were stopped at the crosswalk, just as you always do when you're first in line at the light. A police officer pulled up on our left and another car on the right. It was 3 lanes of through traffic, plus a left turn lane, and we were in the middle through lane. There was nothing extraordinary at all, just a regular traffic light stop. I don't even think we were chatting. And there were no smartphones back then. We just patiently waited as the traffic going north-south slowed, we were headed east, and came to a stop. The light turned green. I put the big hunk of metal into gear and we pulled out, gaining speed through the intersection, until I rode that baby into second gear. Once on the other side of the intersection, we both looked around confused, because none of the cars had followed us through. All the eastbound lanes on both sides of us were completely empty. I looked in the rearview mirror and said, "What the fuck?" She turned completely around and said, "What the fuck?" I automatically slowed the car down as we now headed our lonely way along the middle lane, just past this huge intersection. Behind us, all the north and southbound traffic was still speeding through the intersection. The police car was still in the left through lane. There wasn't a single car that had came through the light with us. They were all just right where we had left them at the light. Even though we had experienced driving through the intersection completely normally, it was as if we had been somehow transported to the other side before the light had changed. My heart was racing so fast I had to pull over. We were wondering if the police officer was going to pull us over. Did we somehow go too early? But we'd gone through an empty intersection. First off the line. It was currently jam-packed with cars racing across the way we'd driven. We definitely would have at least noticed or more likely gotten into a terrible accident if we had. What about the police officer? Why didn't he notice all of this go down? I switched to the right lane and turned off into the very first side street, where I immediately pulled to the side of the road and stopped the car. We just couldn't understand what had happened. Seconds after we pulled over, the police car as well as all the other busy traffic whizzed by on the eastbound road we just turned off of. It took a while for me to gather myself and continue our trip. We've talked about it over and over, and analyzed every detail, but we have never been able to make sense of what happened that day. 5. Last night I got a little stoned and planned to work on some artistic projects. I've one children's story I've had in my head for years that I'm finally getting around to compiling. I'm doing some illustrations and writing when I felt I needed some extra inspiration for the progression of the piece. I went into my closet and fished out the original papers I had written all my ideas on the very first night I had the idea for this story, about 2 to 2.5 years ago. I knew exactly where they were, within a folder that I keep all my artwork within. I opened up the folder and yep, there they were. I grabbed those papers along with some others I might need. At this point I have about 12 sheets of paper in my hand. The papers I needed with most of my ideas on them were done on large white construction paper, while the others were mostly just binder paper. Okay, are you with me? All I did was move the construction paper to the back of the pile to look at some binder paper. I then went on to the important documents in the back to find that they were no longer there. And when I say no longer there, I mean they were straight up removed from the ether. All of a sudden I was confused, like, what? They were just there. Now they are not. I've searched under my desk, under my bed, within every notebook I own, in the art folder, in all my drawers, and under the couch. Something very interesting about this sub is that to gain back that sanity, the impossible becomes probable. Now I'm looking upstairs, outside, in my kitchen cabinets, in my car, in the laundry room, within all the pillowcases in my house, through every stack of paper I see, when in reality, I know I didn't even get out of my desk. This has me a little shaken. I've learned that there are other forces at work than what we think is reality, and I keep telling myself I'm exaggerating or to stop making a big deal of it. But where are the papers? Where are the papers? This is rather trivial due to some of the very perspective-shifting things some have experienced. I'm bewildered, so you must have been traumatized. Something I'd like to say to all who have encountered something unexplainable is, I believe you. You may explain your situation to relatives or friends who dismiss it, or try to provide logical solutions to what happened. But sometimes there isn't one. And that is unsettling as fuck. So to all who have endured some crazy shit, and attempts to provide comfort and sanity towards you, I believe you. Where are the papers? Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Glitch in the Matrix Stories, episode 76. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, I think it's going to be one of those funny days for me today, and my sleeping schedule's still messed up. Currently recording this at 20 to 11 in the morning. I really should be getting to bed. But I've got this thing, where if I've got to do 2 videos the next day, or 3 videos, I think to myself, well, you really should do a bit of recording before you go to bed. It's almost like a habit, a compulsion you might say. And on the plus side, that does mean that the videos generally get made a lot quicker, because half the work's done. But it also means that Hellfreezer, who should be getting his sleep back on track, so he's getting up at a civilized hour, by which I mean like 4 PM, can get things sorted. But, well, I'll get it sorted eventually. At least I'm still sleeping properly. I mean, it's not like I'm... anyway, enough grumbling. I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.